Imagine that everything in your life is happening in the best possible way, in a way you had never imagined. Her company is a success, and her father named her heir to the South Korean family company, despite her not being the firstborn. This results in his brothers and sisters-in-law revolting. However, something happens when you are doing the last tests of a suit made for extreme sports. A storm suddenly forms when you are high up and tractors start flying close to where you are, and then you faint. When you wake up, it appears to be in a forest. However, you have no idea what is going on and only realize that you are in a dangerous area when a North Korean army officer is willing to hide you and help you return home. How will our protagonist get out of this? I'm Nina, and today's recap will be Crash Landing on You. The story begins with the employee, more of the protagonist's right-hand man, showing how the team will work to cover a scandal in the news. She was caught going out with a man who is a well-known actor. However, it turns out that Se-ri sees the situation as a strategy to boost the company's sales, so she asks that the earrings, necklaces, and accessories from the new collection not be blurred in the photos and increases the stock of these pieces in stores. The protagonist receives a call from her older brother. Their father is going to be released on parole, and the man, despite not agreeing with his sister's actions, thinks she should come to see her father. However, Se-ri doesn't seem to be very close to her relatives, and as soon as she hangs up, she blocks her brother's number. The protagonist's sister-in-law and her brother believe that her father wants to announce the heir to the family company, which is why she asked everyone to attend. The media believes that the person who will occupy the position will be one of his two sons. However, when almost everyone is gathered at the table, the two brothers and especially the sisters-in-law begin to talk about what each one did wrong that harmed the company in order to influence the decision of the head of the family. When Se-ri arrives, she greets her father, wishes him to take care of her health, and refuses his request to return to live in that huge house. After saying goodbye, she receives an unexpected surprise from everyone there. The head of the family offers his position to his daughter. He recognizes that the woman left home and started her company 10 years ago, always making it grow, so he believes that she is the most competent for the position, and Se-ri accepts. But as she is a very busy person, she leaves it to meet another day to stay up to date with what is happening in the company, and her father left it up to her to decide to fire and hire whoever she wanted. And then the protagonist leaves. The next day, Se-ri, along with a film crew, will test a line of clothing for extreme sports that she will launch. Her right-hand man thinks it's a bit risky for her to participate as the person who will test the product. He thought it would be better to just send a report to her boss. However, she explains that she is in a hurry, as her position will soon rise. The man continues to think it is dangerous because of the speed at which the wind is, but the woman insists on doing it. Everything is going well until a storm starts to arise and the protagonist ends up involved in it, spinning around with tractors, animals, and other things. She goes out. In the next scene, we see North Korean army officers. They go to meet South Korean officers, who are with 3 men being detained from North Korea after being caught looking for cultural artifacts in the South and gathering information. At one point, the soldiers began to lower their weapons. However, the men who were being detained picked up a pistol that was on the ground and began to fight. The soldiers receive an order not to engage in conflict, so the North returns with its men home and the South goes to its area. Now let's get to the facts. The North Korean army is monitored by the State Security Department, and these 3 men that Captain Ri was treating like thieves received authorization from within to cross the border with the South. The captain informs the Lord that he appears to be part of the State Security Department, which promised the Southern captain that he would investigate the thieves, and Mr. Cho says that he will make a promise to the captain. If he catches him committing any act that could threaten the security of the army, he will not go easy on Ri Jong, regardless of his social class, so the man will be liquidated immediately. In the next scene, we see the captain's team of soldiers drinking a good wine that has been stored for a long time. They know that they cannot drink it during watch hours, but as the next day they will change shifts and have lighter duties, they believe that nothing will happen, and they decide to enjoy it. Meanwhile, the protagonist's right-hand man is freaking out because the rescue team still hasn't found the woman's body, but at least the film crew was found alive. The next day, Sairi wakes up in the middle of a forest. She is hanging by her sports equipment and screams for help. The captain and another soldier are walking through the area, but only Ri Zhong hears the woman's call and dismisses his companion to go see the damage the storm caused, while he looks for whoever is asking for help. When he finds her, he immediately points his gun at this unknown person in front of her, and the protagonist, at first glance, thinks it is the army that was sent to rescue her. However, when paying attention to the captain's uniform, she realizes that something is wrong. The man asks her to get down immediately, and the woman complies but ends up falling on top of Ri Zhong. The protagonist presents herself as an employee of a fashion company and prefers not to say her name. She is still a little confused about where she is and believes that they are in an area in South Korea where soldiers from the north were sent on an emergency mission. Captain Ri tries to explain to the intruder that she was actually the one who went to the north, and according to protocol, she would have to go through some procedures. She would be arrested and interrogated. Then the protagonist starts running to get away from him. However, she ends up in an area with mines buried by the storm, and when the man approaches her to help her, she ends up stepping on one. This is the perfect time for Sairi to escape very carefully, but first she confesses to the captain, since they will no longer see each other, that he is her type. As soon as the woman leaves the place, a soldier finds her superior, and Ri Zhong asks the man to pass the message to the rest of the team to look for a woman, arrest her, but not shoot. Then the soldier helps the captain. He disarms the mine with a little fear, as he had only done this in training. The soldiers received the message. However, as they were perhaps still under the influence of the drink, they understood that they should immediately shoot the South Korean woman when they found her. And as soon as they find it, they run to catch it. However, Sairi, with the adrenaline in her body, runs very quickly and doesn't even notice the signs warning about the mines. Thankfully, nothing happened. At one point, she arrives at a fence that is damaged because of a tree that fell on top of her, and she believes it to be the right way. The soldiers try to warn her from afar that she will not reach her country through this place, but Hao was chasing her pointing guns a short time ago. The protagonist decides to take a risk. If they discover that the soldiers let the South Korean woman cross the fence into North Korea, the entire team will be punished by the State Security Department. Meanwhile, they are deploying drones, dogs, and everything else they can to look for Sairi. Of course, her brothers are waiting for the 48 hours that are used to define the case to pass so they can rule her out as an heir. And the protagonist's mother thinks about the conversation she had with her the night before, where her daughter reminded her that she never had a mother she could count on and that she wouldn't do what her wife had asked of her, which was to refuse the position at the company. We see in the next scene Sairi taking off her jumpsuit. She decided that as soon as things got better, she will disapprove of this product, as it ripped easily and the woman got hurt on her leg. The protagonist continues trying to get to her home or somewhere she can use a cell phone to communicate and ask for ransom. And so as not to continue walking in circles in the forest, she marks the trees with bows she made with leaves. We now see those three men who were detained, and Mr. Cho picked them up with the captain. They were really in the south looking for information, and the man asked them to point out to him where a commodity is on the map. Mr. Cho says that the trio will be rewarded, but it is then seen that when they are being taken to a place, on the way, trucks appear and push the car down the hill, the same they do with a woman who was hitchhiking and ended up seeing all. Meanwhile, the soldiers continue looking for the woman, even after changing patrols in that area, and end up finding her sports clothes and then the little bows made from leaves. Sairi has found a small village and begins to believe that she is in South Korea. However, the closer she gets to the residence, she realizes that she has never seen anything like this before. People who don't have energy all day don't care. There are refrigerators or electric stoves, something very different from their reality. Suddenly, someone pulls her into a courtyard, and it is Captain Ri. The man enters into a conflict with himself as to whether he should take this woman's life, as there is still the possibility that she is a spy. When the protagonist discovers that he is thinking that she might be an agent, she starts laughing and says that if he looked up her name on the internet, if she revealed it, Ri Zhang would know that she is very famous in the south. However, another surprise arrives for Se-ri. There is no internet there. The soldiers from the captain's team began to appear at his house. Everyone arrived almost celebrating, as they thought that the woman who was found lifeless thrown from a hill would be the one they were looking for. However, as soon as they saw Se-ri, the glow disappeared from your eyes. Since the State Security Department cannot know that a woman crossed the fence during the soldiers' shift, otherwise they will be toast, so the men are forced to help Se-ri get home. So they come up with a plan. In a few days, Se-ri will take a boat at night that will take her to an international ship and thus arrive in South Korea. The protagonist is enchanted by some things, such as the fact that they don't have a refrigerator and some people have never had contact with one, so they discover other ways to store food without it spoiling. After a while, the team needs to return to their station, so the captain taught Se-ri how to communicate with him in case of emergency, but the woman uses the phone for various nonsense, like to find out if he has scented candles, or how to heat water to take a shower, among other things. Later, Captain Ri decides to continue his investigation after discovering what happened to the 3 thieves. He begins to think that the security department may be involved in keeping trucks secret, as there is a pattern of accidents. The department allows him to investigate and asks him to go to another city the next day for a meeting with the department director. As soon as Captain Ri leaves the room, the 2 men talk about a new account. It turns out that a man scammed a huge amount of money out of a rich businessman, in this case one of the protagonist's brothers, and he is going to North Korea to hide himself. Returning to the protagonist, that moment of the day comes when they turn off the electricity, and she starts to get scared. She thinks they might be doing this to make it easier to take her life, and she despairs when she hears someone entering the house. However, it was the captain, and as soon as she realized who it was, she burst into tears. The man took her a candle that she had asked earlier if she had and several other cosmetics. He tries to help the woman calm down, but it is a matter of days before she returns to her home. The next day, when the captain goes to identify himself in the city he was told to go to, he explains that he is there for an investigation and the men have arrested him. They say that he is the one who will be investigated. Ri Zhang is taken to a location and placed in an electric chair. A man begins to interrogate him, as if the thieves losing their lives were his fault or that he was plotting something. But the captain doesn't lay down his head and chests the man. He says that there is no basis for his speculations. The general, when he enters the room and notices who is sitting in the chair, runs to get him out of there, then curses whoever was sitting in the chair. Interrogating. The general says that Captain Ri is the only son of the director of the Politburo, which would be a central committee of the Communist Party. As soon as the general and Ri Zhang leave the room, the man calls Mr. Cho and asks if he wants to dig his grave, then tells him who the captain's father is. Later, the general and Ri Zhang go to dinner. The captain wants to investigate this accident, as he believes it may be linked to his brother's accident. There are many coincidences and questions that have not been answered. Meanwhile, Ri Zhang's team of soldiers discovers that there will be a random inspection of the houses today and is nervous, not knowing what to do about the protagonist. As they cannot contact the woman, they contact the captain, and the man borrows the general's car. He goes as fast as he can with the vehicle to arrive in time to try to prevent them from hurting Se-ri or something worse happen to your men. Before Mr. Cho and the other men entered the house, the protagonist discovered that Ri Zhang studied music before enlisting. The captain manages to arrive before Mr. Cho takes Se-ri to be interrogated and says that she is his fiancée. He had not introduced her to people before because the protagonist is on a mission in South Korea. She is a spy, and consequently could not provide further information. This lie was what freed them for a while, but they would have to be more careful now. Although most people believed that the woman belonged to Division 11, Mr. Cho didn't buy it much. Later, some of the wives from the neighborhood get together to deliver some plates of food to Ri Jong and try to learn a little more about this story about him having a fiancée. However, as soon as the protagonist appears to help him carry the gifts, they become less suffocating. When the two are alone, Se-ri arranges with the man that as soon as she leaves and they start asking about her, the captain will say that the woman left him. We see in the next scene that Ri Jong's real fiancé, Seo Dan, was studying in Russia and is now back in Korea. However, the man still doesn't know, and as his uncle lent the best car he had to the captain, she intends to make a visit with the excuse of taking the vehicle to go see him. It then shows Mr. Cho going to the bugging department to talk to a man. It seems that the two are directly involved in the death of the captain's brother, and now Mr. Cho wants this man to find out if the captain is planning to do anything about it. Then a microphone is installed outside Ri Jong's house that allows him to listen to everything that happens inside the residence, and the man begins to write down any word that is said in the place. And he remembers years ago, the day of the captain's brother's accident. He was the one who told the trucks where the next target was so they could crush the car, and just before it happened, the man was talking about how proud he was of his brother, that he was a genius at the piano, and that he had composed something for him. The man would show him as soon as he returned home. The listener gets emotional remembering this. The next day, the wives invite the protagonist to help them make kimchi. However, the woman refuses the request, which leads to her being one of the topics talked about at the women's table, as they are all helping to make it. And at the post, when the captain tells his soldiers what he had to do to get the protagonist released from inspection, and Sergeant Kim comments that it looks like what they do in dramas to outwit authority, sometimes the characters even kiss. Ri Jong sends the soldiers to his house to continue repairs, a task he gave to disguise the time the men spend there so they can keep the woman safe and out of trouble. Meanwhile, the captain continues his investigation into the accident that occurred involving the unidentified trucks. The men showed whoever gave them access to the road that they were part of the engineering department that night. However, the man comments that he found it strange that the three carried nothing in their compartments. The man adds about the woman who passed away, and Ri Jong thinks it wasn't an accident with her either, but rather that the woman could have witnessed something. The guard also saw that the trucks had unusual armor on the front of the vehicles. Meanwhile, the protagonist's brother is looking for the scammer who took the company's money. However, in the places where his men are looking for him, he is not there. So his wife suggests that they look in a place that her husband thinks he would never go. She bets that the scammer is there. Returning to the protagonist, the soldiers need to run after a little boy who is a clothesline thief. When they catch him, the child explains that he is doing this because his sister has been unable to open her eyes for days due to hunger. Both of them live on the street, and he needed to get some change to buy something to eat. So Se-ri prepares a bag with several things for the boy to take for him and his little sister. Later, she prepares an award for the soldiers. The woman gives each one a position and a reward for helping her. For the captain, she planted a tomato plant as a thank you. At night, Ri Jong takes Se-ri to the little boat that will take her to the ship. When it's time to get on the little boat, the man decides to go along to make sure she gets on the ship. And since they won't see each other again, they start to tell each other things, like their real names. Suddenly, the little boat is stopped by the authorities, who ask to search the vehicle, and the two hide in the compartment underneath. The protagonist believes that there is nothing left to do, and the captain remembers what his soldier had said about what happens in the dramas, so he tells her not to be scared by what he is going to do, and when the authority opens this compartment, he catches the two kissing. The owner of the little boat explains to the authorities that they hired him to go fishing at night, but as they are young, other things ended up happening. The authority doesn't arrest them or do anything like that, it just orders them to return with the boat immediately, and Se-ri is frustrated to see that the chance to leave the place slipped through her hands. The woman waits for the captain to sleep and leaves at dawn. She leaves him a note, but it turns out that the man heard the gate slam as soon as she left, and when he reads the letter, he goes after her. The protagonist is at the top of a mountain with her sports equipment that took her to North Korea. Before deciding to jump, she tries to contact her walkie-talkie, but as expected, no one responds. Ri Jong comes to Se-ri, and when she realizes that her walk-talk is on, she says that they need to leave the place immediately, as the State Security Department must have already located them. The only thing the two can do is jump, and that's what happens. In Mr. Cho's office, he hands over some money to the eavesdropper, who works directly for him, so the man can buy some meat to give to his son. And in the market, the listener ends up coming across Captain Ri buying coffee beans, perhaps because he is a little nervous because of the man he is watching being in the same place. The man is a little careless when it comes to paying for the food, and a wallet thief takes yours. Ri Jong runs after the thief and tries to keep up with him. However, the captain arrives first at the gang and, in the end, manages to deal with the men surrounding him alone. The eavesdropper thanks Ri Jong for recovering his item, but when he opens his wallet, the thieves take the money. Meanwhile, Se-ri is with the captain's soldiers at her house. He sends the boys there to protect the protagonist if anything happens, and she starts to pay attention to the care the man has for her. She even starts to think that maybe he likes her. Later, two wives from the neighborhood show up at Ri Jong's house to tell the protagonist that today is Young Ae's birthday. If so, they can help their husbands at work, and the two will inspect the gifts to see what is really good. But Se-ri says she won't be able to go and closes the gate in the women's faces. We see Mr. Cho in the next scene. He is talking to that man who didn't know who Captain Ri was and started to interrogate him until the general appeared. This man is sorry for what he did. However, Mr. Cho doesn't care about that. He wants the man to set up a meeting with a contact he has with a person who can find out if the protagonist is really from Division 11. Mr. Cho believes that they can use the woman to bring down Ri Jong's family. Returning to Se-ri, she starts to think that she can help Captain Ri rise in position, so he will have more power to get her out of her place, and one way to do this is by flattering Young Ae, who is the colonel's wife. Senior. So the protagonist goes to the woman's birthday and manages to charm everyone, but especially the birthday girl. She uses her knowledge of fashion and beauty. She even comments that Yoon Ae seems to be younger than Se-ri. The protagonist had to invent a North Korean name so that women would believe she was from the place, and the chosen one was Cho Sam-suk. The captain goes to the engineering repair unit to see if he can find anything about the trucks that were involved in the accident and manages to get a piece of the material that is used to make the armor at the front of the vehicle. And at night, Mr. Cho meets with the man who has access to information from Division 11 to share everything he knows about the protagonist. The man checks and will get back to him as soon as he can. After Young Ae's birthday party ends, Se-ri asks that, if she has the chance, she speaks well of her fiancé to her husband, and the woman promises that she will arrange that. The captain saw that the protagonist was in the house, and so as not to appear as if he was waiting for her, he went up and down the street several times until the two accidentally bumped into each other. The two return home on a bicycle he provided to support their weight. And at the residence, the group has a pleasant evening eating oysters and drinking. Meanwhile, at Se-ri's family home, their father names the girl's brother Se-hyang as the company's new heir, which causes his daughter-in-law and his eldest son to start a fight at the table. They claim that the man is not the firstborn, and they start talking about the things that the man did that harmed the company. The eldest son also adds that Se-hyang wanted to talk to gossip magazines about the protagonist being the illegitimate daughter of the head of the family so that the media would comment that she was not worthy of taking over the company. The man asks his mother to give her opinion, and although the woman never had affection for Se-ri, and now we discover the reason, she says that she thinks her husband made the wrong decision of naming another heir when the protagonist is still alive, fighting to return home. The next day, Se-ri wakes up in the bed in the room, and the captain makes the black coffee that she asked for so much. The man did everything from preparing the beans to grinding and ironing. When Ri Jong is leaving for work, the protagonist has nothing to give him to thank him for the things he has done for her, so she makes him a little finger heart, which leaves men who have no contact with Southern culture confused. When asking her soldiers what this sign means, one of them explains that she is giving her heart to him, as if saying that she loves him dearly. But there is a small detail in the middle of all this. No one knew that Captain Ri was already engaged to another woman, and when he tells his soldiers, they are in shock, as they have always seen their superior as such a straight-laced figure. Meanwhile, Se-hyung and his wife went to Se-ri's company to collect the tax returns with the protagonist's right-hand man. They made it clear that there may be some changes in the future, and as expected, we know that they want to get along. Get rid of the company. In the next scene, we see the captain's official fiancée taking a taxi to go to his house. As she had already said, she was going to get her uncle's car, but on the way, something unforeseen happened and the car broke down. Seo Dan's salvation was that man who is in North Korea, running away from the protagonist's brother. The scammer offered the woman a ride to the place she wanted to go, and as she had no other option, she ended up accepting. The protagonist ended up going to the market with some wives from the neighborhood. However, as it got dark, it became increasingly dark, as they don't use much electricity, and the woman ended up losing her new friends. So the women go to the captain's house to tell him that Se-ri is lost there, and the man runs there to find her. And Mr. Cho received the call he was waiting for from the man who investigated about the protagonist being from Division 11. As expected, he didn't find anyone with the descriptions he received, and now Ri Jong may have problems. When the captain arrives at the market, it is very dark and there are many people there, so he decides to buy a candle and hold it up so that the protagonist suddenly goes towards him, and that is what happens. As soon as he finds her, Se-ri's eyes are shining like she's about to cry. At the end of each episode, there is an epilogue that I only discovered in this one, so I ask you not to cut off my head. We see the protagonist on a very high bridge, but there is a beautiful landscape. Seo Dan and Ri Jong are also in it, and it is only the couple's second date. They took this trip to create intimacy. The woman complained about him only taking photos of the landscape and wanted him to take one with her, so Ri Jong asked Se-ri to do it. Before taking the photo, the protagonist comments that he deserves someone better, and the photo that was taken on that day, Seo Dan keeps in his wallet to this day. When the two are returning home, Ri Jong believes that the time has come to tell the protagonist about his fiancée so that there is no confusion about whether she is developing feelings for him. And the scammer, who had just left Seo Dan at the captain's house, passes by them and immediately recognizes Se-ri. However, he thinks it could have been someone very similar, as he thinks the woman would have no reason to be in that place. Meanwhile, Seo Dan is still waiting in front of Ri Jong's house. As the wives in the neighborhood are very curious, they go to the woman to ask what she is waiting for or looking for in the place. And when they discover that Seo Dan is Captain Ri's fiancé, they are shocked that the man has committed to two women, and soon gossip spreads among the women in the neighborhood. Se-ri and Ri Jong have not yet arrived at the residence. The two are talking about how if the woman who is his real fiancé appeared there, it would ruin their cover. However, the man says that this will not happen as she is in another country. However, as soon as they turn the corner, there is the original bride. Seo Dan ignores that the protagonist is with her fiancé at first contact, but after he introduces the woman as a partner on a mission, he decides to question whether, after the task is completed, they will no longer see each other. And the captain says yes, they will no longer have contact. So Se-ri decides to get out of the situation and says that she will go home, but Ri Jong takes her arm and takes her to the gate of his house, then tells the woman to go in, as it is very dark in the streets. The man is going to take his fiancée to her house, and on the way, Seo Dan says that she knows the love between them is missing, but she is doing everything in order to work and asks Captain Ri to cooperate. As soon as the two arrive at the place where she lives, her uncle drags him in to go in and greet the rest of the family, in this case his bride's mother. The woman insists that he stay for dinner, and as he doesn't have much choice, the man ends up accepting. In the next scene, we see the scammer in his new home, thinking about a date he had with the protagonist, which didn't go very well, but it made the man realize her intelligence, as she made it clear that they wouldn't have a second date and that she knew that he was laying the groundwork for something bigger, so he said Sung Joon should take her brother's money and go far away. Meanwhile, Se-ri receives a visit from the neighborhood women. They went to console the protagonist, as they all know about the second bride, which in this case would be the original. They bring beer and fish to eat, then start criticizing Captain Ri for putting Seo Dan in the car and taking her home. The women begin to feel sorry for their friend, as they think the man is going to abandon her. And the leader believes that they must do something to teach Ri Jong a lesson, which makes the protagonist desperate to calm them down. The senior colonel's wife was so angry that she said she would tell her husband to give the captain a disadvantage in the army, as he was an immoral person. So Se-ri has to think of something quickly to stop the woman from doing this. The protagonist says that she and the captain are like Korea's Romeo and Juliet, that her parents don't agree with their relationship, and that's why they found another one for the man. And incredible as it may seem, this worked with the wives, who became sentimental about the story and agreed to just drink, eat, and gossip. Captain Ri goes to his parents' house after dinner with Seo Dan's family instead. He makes a request to his father that he get a place for Se-ri on the team of athletes who are going to leave the country, and his father says he will do it. However, if something happens and they find out, the man won't be able to do anything. Returning to Se-ri, before the women leave, she talks to young Ae and explains that if Ri Jong gets the star, he needs to be promoted. Suddenly, his parents will become more generous and let the couple stay together, and for that, he needs this to happen first. And the woman promises to talk to the senior colonel about it. The next morning, when the captain arrives, he tells him about the plan to send the protagonist on the athlete team out of the country, and he hears everything. So Se-ri needs to take a photo for her new passport and go to the city to do this before she needs to change her haircut and buy some new clothes that suit the place they are in. The protagonist is out of money, so she decides to pawn her watch to earn a few bucks and ends up finding another original watch instead, which makes her wonder why it is there. And the seller explains that the man who left him didn't even accept money, he just handed it over and never came back. In the next scene, we see Mr. Cho with that wire. The man comments about never finding that watch that belonged to Captain Ri's brother, the same one who was in the pawn shop, and asks if the wire has anything to do with it. When he goes to work, the captain can't find his soldiers, so he tries to find out what happened to them and discovers that the State Security Department is interrogating them. However, none of the boys told them what was happening, and Ri Jong went to the place to release them. When he arrives, the captain tells Mr. Cho that if he is curious about something in Ri Jong's life, just ask. He adds that he must start telling the truth about the things the man is involved in. Then the phone rings and Mr. Cho discovers that he is being investigated. Meanwhile, Se-ri defends her son from listening to other children and teaches him that he must stand up against his bullies. And we see that the protagonist's right-hand man got a recording that proves that the woman is alive. A radio picked up the same frequency that she was using for the walk-talk on that day. In the next scene, Se-hyung meets one of the men who helped the scammer escape to North Korea and tells him that she will pay 10 times more than Sung Joon if they hand him over. And returning to the protagonist, the soldiers are all having dinner at Ri Jong's house, and the man is feeling guilty about seeing his companions all injured. The protagonist knows that she is the reason for all this, so since she has nothing to give to thank them, she makes a little heart for everyone. Which leaves men shocked, as they believe that it is like a declaration of love, but in the end they come to a consensus that it shouldn't be that. And we see that the man listening in his house remembers the day that Captain Ri's brother helped him. Some men were beating him for doing his job and saying what he heard. The man arrived at the place and ordered everyone to leave him alone. Peace, then he extended his hand to listen. Remembering this scene made the man emotional. The next day, the protagonist and Ri Jong are going to the place where the passport photo is taken. However, on the way, they end up facing a setback. The train needs maintenance, and they spend hours waiting for it to be fixed. In the end, The two need to sleep outside, as it is very cold inside the train, so the captain lit a fire and bought blankets, food, and everything else that would make the protagonist more comfortable. And the next day, they managed to get to the place to take the photo. Se-ri even suggested that the two take one to keep as a souvenir for when they no longer see each other, but the captain doesn't think it's necessary. But when the protagonist was no longer around, he asked for an extra photo of the one she took so he could keep it for himself. Meanwhile, the scammer is also in the same hotel where the protagonist is staying, and the men he paid to protect him in the country betrayed his trust when they tried to hand him over to Se-hyang, so Sung-joon needs to escape from them. When the man is at the hotel reception on the phone with Se-hyang, he comes across Se-ri and decides to ask her brother how the woman is. Sung-joon receives the answer that the protagonist ended up losing her life. Then he hangs up the phone and pulls Se-ri to the elevator, so the two can talk. However, the captain follows them and stops Sung-joon. Se-ri explains to Ri-jong that he knows this man and tells the scammer that the captain is your security guard. But the two left a scheduled meeting to talk later. Ri-jong asks the protagonist how they met and discovers that her brothers arranged a marriage for her with this man so that she could live in another country and they would no longer need to see her. Se-ri comments that her brothers must be jumping for joy because they think she is dead, and the captain says that she is talking nonsense because, no matter how much they have had disagreements, in the end they are still family, and they wouldn't want that. While they are talking, a woman who knows Seo-dan enters the restaurant and makes a call to the original bride to tell her that the captain is on a date with someone else. Seo-dan calmly explained to the woman that he was aware and they were just co-workers, but inside his blood was boiling. Then he stops what he was doing and tells his mother that the couple's parents will have dinner together that night, then goes to the hotel where Se-ri and Ri-jong are staying. Sung-joon ends up being caught by the men who want to hand him over to the protagonist's brother, and they leave the scammer very hurt. They give Sung-joon the cell phone so Sung-joon can talk to Se-hyang, and to escape losing his life, the scammer thinks about using the advantage of knowing where Se-ri is to his advantage. So the two make a deal. Sung-joon will have to hold the woman in North Korea and make sure she never comes back, so he will forgive the money that was stolen and leave them alone. When Seo-dan arrives at the hotel, he quickly gets the number of rooms the two are in due to having contact with the owner and catches them leaving the same room. Of course, the woman didn't like it and told the captain that that night they would have dinner with their parents. Afterwards, Seo-dan goes up to the roof of the hotel and ends up meeting Sung-joon there. The two start talking, and he gives her tips on how to win over Captain Ri. The woman also gives tips to the man, but on how to deal with money. Later, Seo-dan discovers that the scammer also knows the woman who is disturbing her and her fiancé's relationship when he sees them talking at the hotel. And at dinner, Seo-dan's mother says a lot of nonsense, but in the end, it results in something, as Ri-jong's father ended up setting the wedding date. Returning to the protagonist, when she is in the bathroom, Seo-dan enters and says that she is a very sociable woman, to say the least, as she goes to the hotel with one man and has coffee with another. Seo-dan takes advantage and already comments that they have decided on the wedding date, making it clear that Se-ri being away from them is the best gift a woman can give. The protagonist returns to her meeting and asks Sung-joon for a favor. She wants the man to inform her father that she is still alive and for him to continue with her plan to take over the company, as she will soon return home. Se-ri's brother was listening to everything, and that's why he wants her to stay in place so much. After a while, the captain goes to the two and tells the protagonist that it's time to end the meeting. He really doesn't like or trust the scammer. Then the two go to a restaurant to eat fried chicken and drink beer, something Se-ri missed doing. The next day, Mr. Cho goes to the State Security Department to be interrogated and manages to be released very quickly after putting on the table the wrong things that the man who was interrogating him did. And Mr. Cho talks to the senior colonel. As soon as he leaves, it seems like the colonel helped him figure out these things about who interrogated him, and Mr. Cho says he's part of his family now. Afterwards, Mr. Cho goes to Sung-joon's house, and the scammer asks the man to keep one more person in the house besides him, which would be Se-ri. When showing the photo to Mr. Cho, he recognizes it at the time. Whoever it is, and the two of them plan something to catch her when she is going to the airport to leave the country. The listener knows all the information necessary for that. Returning, the protagonist tells the women in the neighborhood that she will leave so that the captain and his original bride can live in peace, which is a great excuse for when she leaves the country, and the women are upset to hear about it. The next day, the soldiers and Se-ri go to a picnic to celebrate the woman's departure from the country, and she receives a poem written by them. The captain only participates at the end, as he was preparing for the day the protagonist leaves. The man took some weapons, improved his motorcycle, and will follow her car without her knowing so that he can protect her if something happens. At night, when the woman is saying goodbye to the captain, she confesses that she will miss him and that he is one of the boys who is part of the group of soldiers who will take her to the airport. As soon as the car leaves the scene, the listener tells Mr. Cho to put the trucks into action. Then, on the way, trucks start to appear, and the boy even manages to dodge them well. The captain's help was extremely necessary. He managed to stop one truck, and so only the other continued following the car. But at a certain point, the two are trapped in the vehicle and are unable to get out. While the remaining truck comes towards them, what saves them is Ri Jong with the motorcycle, who throws it in front of the vehicle and then shoots it to explode and stop it. However, the truck driver was still alive, and when the captain was seeing if Se-ri was hurt, the boy and he ended up being shot, but before he went out, Ri Jong shot the driver. And the protagonist finds herself feeling desperate without knowing what to do. This may be her last chance to get out of North Korea, but Se-ri couldn't leave two people who helped her so much injured. So when the woman is driving the vehicle, she decides to take them both to the hospital. At the scene, doctors warn that Ri Jong is losing a lot of blood and needs to go to surgery urgently. As it is a small hospital, there is no blood bank, so the protagonist is responsible for finding someone to donate. The soldier tries to explain to her that if she goes to the airport now, she might be able to catch the flight, but that is no longer her priority, and upon discovering that her blood type is compatible with the captain's, Se-ri offers to donate. While in the anguish of waiting for news of Ri Jong's surgery, the woman receives the clothes he was wearing and, upon unfolding them, discovers that the man had kept a photo of Se-ri in his things, the one she had taken for him. The passport. The protagonist is moved because, when she suggested they take one as a souvenir, he was arrogant, and in the end, he kept one in secret. Later, the surgery was completed successfully, and now we just have to wait for the captain to recover. While the man remains unconscious, we see Ri Jong in a performance. He received a lot of applause from the audience, but when leaving the stage, it seems that the captain had lost his ground when he received the news that his brother had died in a car accident. So Ri Jong would have to return to his country, and while waiting for the boat to transport his things, a little girl asked if he could play a song on his piano. The man said yes, and for the first and last time, the captain played the song that he had created for his brother, who didn't even have the opportunity to hear it. When Ri Jong wakes up, the protagonist can't control his happiness when she sees him with his eyes open. However, the man doesn't understand why she's still in place. Frustrated at having almost lost his life and putting his soldier at risk, the man yells at Se-ri and says that she doesn't understand that she is always putting them in danger, that her efforts today were all in vain, and that the protagonist shouldn't be there anymore. So Se-ri decides to let him rest and leaves the room, then tells the medical team that the captain has woken up. When they are explaining the situation to her patient, the nurse comments that Ri Jong and his girlfriend were made for each other, as they have the same blood type, and so she can save his life. And the doctor adds that he thought the woman would faint from crying and that she must be in some other corner of the hospital crying at that exact moment. The captain ends up recognizing that he was very rude and goes to look for Se-ri. When he finds her, he apologizes for the things he said to her and adds that she wanted to go home so much that she should have done that. But the protagonist responds that at least once, she would have to protect him since the man did so much for her. In the end, the two end up kissing. In the next scene, we see Mr. Cho. He already knows that Ri Jong is involved in preventing the South Korean woman from ending her life and asks his men to call all the hospitals in the region so they can locate him. And Sung Joon is already nervous with so much worry about not having been able to find the protagonist yet. It turns out that the men he is paying to keep him in North Korea understood that they would have to stop the woman from returning to the South, no matter the cost. Whatever the cost, however, in truth, the man wanted her very much alive. Seo Dan goes with his mother to the village where Captain Ri lives, and at first Se-ri's friends are very harsh with women. However, after the bride's mother delivers facial products to the wives, they decide to help both of them find an apartment for Seo Dan to move into. Sung Joon has the car parked near the captain's house to see if one of the two appears at the scene and ends up coming across Seo Dan arriving. The man is surprised to learn that Ri Jong is the fiancé of this beautiful woman and how the two are waiting for the same person. Sung Joon offers her to wait in the comfort of his car with him. Back at the hospital, the nurse tells Ri Jong and the protagonist that she saw a couple kissing the night before, and she thought it was absurd. Se-ri sewed a heart on the captain's uniform to disguise the bullet hole, and the two agreed not to pressure each other about what happened the night before. Sung Joon and Seo Dan get along well. The man talks to her about marriage and says he knows how she feels since there was one that was arranged too, but it ended up not working out. The next day, Mr. Cho managed to locate where Ri Jong was being treated and went to the place with trucks full of soldiers. Luckily, Se-ri was outside at the time and managed to hide when she had the opportunity. He called Sung Joon to pick him up. In the captain's room, Mr. Cho reveals that he already knows that the protagonist is a South Korean and speaks as if Ri Jong had shot the engineering soldiers for no reason, but the man makes it clear that someone tried to cause an accident and he was simply protecting her. The captain questions how Mr. Cho is sure that the woman is not a spy and reveals that he knows that he discovered that the man asked someone to investigate her without the necessary authorization to do so. Of course, Mr. Cho didn't like the way Ri Jong spoke and ordered him to be arrested, but his father arrived at that moment and didn't allow that to happen. The protagonist returns to the hospital. The man who is going to pick her up hasn't arrived yet, and the woman needs to disguise that she is with a patient when Seo Dan passes by her so that she doesn't get into any more problems. And in the room, the bride notices the heart sewn into the captain's uniform. When she asks about it, Ri Jong says that she likes the protagonist and has no intention of deceiving Seo Dan. That's why she's telling her. The woman doesn't take it very well. She says that when Se-ri leaves, his feelings for her will disappear and that even with the news that he likes someone else, Seo Dan will continue with the wedding scheduled. Se-ri managed to hide until Mr. Cho left with the soldiers and got along very well with the patient. Then Sung Joon arrived and the woman got in the car. At the place where Sung Joon is staying, he says that everyone is happy with the news that the protagonist is okay. However, the woman doesn't believe that her brothers would say that and begins to distrust the man. Sung Joon even lies about the meeting that would declare the company's new heir. He says it was postponed, but we see in the next scene that the meeting actually took place and Se Hyang was elected through votes. And Se-ri's father ends up declaring that she lost her life due to the time she has been missing. At night, Seo Dan goes with his mother to a store to see her wedding dress. The owner brought a magazine from South Korea, which shows the models that are in fashion, and while browsing, the woman found an article talking about Se-ri. She rips out the page and goes to the hospital to confront her fiancé to find out if he was hiding the truth from her. Meanwhile, Ri Jong is searching the hospital's cameras for any sign of the protagonist, as she simply disappeared after Mr. Cho was the visitor, and he ends up seeing the woman getting into Sung Joon's car. Then the man calls his uncle by Seo Dan, who discovers that the vehicle is being used for something in an inn that has been closed for a while, which is a bit suspicious. At Sung Joon's house, the protagonist wanted to call the captain to let him know that she is fine. However, the man doesn't let her and says that the best thing she can do at the moment is to stay away, as Ri Jong could end up losing her life. Life for Se-ri's selfishness, these words weigh on her mind. Seo Dan confronts the captain, and he confesses that he already knew who she really was and that he is helping her hide in the north. However, she will soon go to the south, and Ri Jong makes it clear that he is willing to lose everything, even his life, to help her. But Seo Dan is also willing to do anything for the one she loves and says that if he does something dangerous, the woman will act. In the next scene, we see the protagonist's past. When she traveled to Switzerland, Saeri no longer had any desire to live. However, something changed within her when she heard a song being played on a piano on the edge of a lake. That melody changed her mind about her life and saved her. Over the years, the protagonist performed a snippet for several people who knew a lot about music, but she never found anyone who knew her. Returning to the captain, the hospital director said he could use anything he needed, and the man asked to borrow an ambulance to go after Saeri. But as he almost ends up falling off a cliff on the way, he decides to go back to recover in the hospital. The next day, Sung Joon calls Ri Jong to let her know that he is with the protagonist, that the woman is fine, and that the man doesn't need to spend his time looking for her. The captain becomes even more nervous after the call, and one of the soldiers who always picks on Saeri says that the woman must have asked her boyfriend from the south to call because she doesn't have the courage, and Ri Jong gets excited, saying that the man doesn't think it's her boyfriend and that the soldier is saying something he doesn't know. The captain shouted so much that the patient in the next room appeared to ask him to speak a little quieter, and when she discovers that he is the man the protagonist likes, she starts saying that the woman had already told her about him. Ri Jong is surprised that Saeri made such a quick friend in the hospital, and even more so when he discovers that the protagonist had said that he was her favorite person. When the patient leaves, the man has a smile that none of his soldiers have seen before. As soon as he is discharged, the captain finds out where Saeri's house is through the different power cables in the middle of the forest. Returning to the protagonist, she remembers when Ri Jong taught her that in all hotel rooms there are bugs, and when searching hers, she discovers several. Afterwards, the protagonist takes what she collected to Sung Joon and the man who helps him. She sits down with the two and wants to know how they plan for her to go to the south. The plans don't seem to exist, so Sung Joon proposes that the two get married with their fake names, so they can leave the place with a foreign passport without looking suspicious. Meanwhile, Seo Dan's mother invites the captain's soldiers to eat and drink with her. One of them ends up getting a little upset and talks all about Saeri. The others even tried to stop her but couldn't. Returning to the protagonist, as it's Christmas Eve, Sung Joon invites her to dinner with him and ends up making the marriage proposal official with a ring. In fact, the man says he never stopped thinking about her, and the dinner is interrupted when Ri Jong turns off the house lights. The man takes out all the guards around him, despite not having recovered 100%. Before leaving, Sung Joon tells the protagonist that if she decides to stay with the captain, his fiancée will denounce him and he will lose his life, so the best Saeri can do is stay away from the man. When he leaves the house, Ri Jong says that he went to the place to look for her and that although he failed in his plans to take her to the south, he will find another way. However, the protagonist makes it clear that he won't do it again, and she doesn't want to take any more risks. She tells him about the marriage proposal she just received and asks the man to leave. After a while, the woman continues on the street crying, thinking about how cold it is and that her loved one could end up freezing, so she decides to take the first car she finds and go after him. When she finds him, Saeri says that nothing has changed in her decision to follow Sung Joon's plan and that they will no longer be able to see each other. However, when the woman goes to start, she discovers that the vehicle is out of gas and they will have to spend a while more time together than she had planned. The two go to a school close to where they are so they can light a fire and warm up. In the next scene, we see Mr. Cho talking to a man about the military director. It seems that this director wants to remove Captain Ri's father from power, and if Mr. Cho brings information that helps him achieve this, they will succeed. So Mr. Cho gives the information to the military director that Captain Ri is sheltering a South Korean woman and asks the man to get approval for an investigation that will bring down Ri Jong's family. Returning to Saeri, she takes care of the captain, who has a fever, and asks how he and Seo Dan met and if they attended the same school. But the man says no, it was a marriage arranged through his parents. Meanwhile, the listener is drinking in front of his house, watching the stars, and his wife approaches to ask what is happening, so the listener vents, saying that he let a man who treated him the way he deserved lose his life. And he is loyal to someone who treats him like an animal. He adds that if something happened to Captain Ri because of him, like what happened to his brother, the listener would not be able to forgive himself. Ri Jong is dreaming of a memory the day he gave the watch to his brother with the money from an award the captain had received. The accessory is the same as the one the protagonist had seen in the pawn shop. The luck of that soldier who opened his mouth to Seo Dan's mother is that the woman the next day didn't remember anything he said. Despite having written down some key words, she doesn't remember. She's just sure that if it's something shocking. The protagonist and the captain return to his house. However, as Mr. Cho is after the woman, he calls the wiretap to find out if the man has returned to the residence, and Manbok lies that the house is empty. Se-ri ends up bumping into the village's wives and taking advantage of meeting them. She decides to sell her engagement ring at the pawn shop and buy gifts to thank them for the advice and friendships they created. The protagonist took her brother's watch from the captain without knowing it to give it to him as a gift too. Meanwhile, the protagonist's right-hand man and another man who was happy that she was his boss continued trying to find her and took the audio they found with Se-ri's voice to the police to investigate. However, brother Se-hyung told the police that he did not recognize the voice and that it could not be his sister's, so the authorities ruled it out. So the two have another plan to find the protagonist's father and show him the audio of his daughter. At first, it doesn't go very well, as the men are waiting for him in the company's garage, and the one who appears first is Se-hyung. Then the man appears, but his son tries to silence the two men, and so his father ends up entering. But he heard the men inside shouting something about Se-ri and decided to go back and listen. Returning to the captain, he wakes up better after a long sleep, and when he leaves his room, the protagonist improvises a Christmas tree for him. Later, when the man is in the courtyard of his house, he receives a call from a number he hadn't saved, and when he answers, he hears Se-ri's voice. The woman tells her that she is leaving with Sung-jun and that she didn't have the opportunity to say goodbye. However, when Ri Jong asks her to tell him where she is, he says that it doesn't matter if she is far away or not. The man just wants to say goodbye. Amidst her tears at having two men point guns at her, the woman just repeats what they wanted her to say, and at the end, when she deviates a little from the script and says that she loves Captain Ri, one shoots up, and then the connection is disconnected. At that moment, Ri Jong's heart stopped, and tears fell from her face. It turns out that when she was returning home with the captain's gift in her hands, these two men appeared, pointing a gun at the protagonist, and took her away. In shock, the woman ended up dropping the gift and staying behind. In addition to having to deal with the protagonist's disappearance, Captain Ri receives a call from the village leader warning him that he needs to return home immediately, as they are searching his entire residence. As soon as he arrives at the place, Mr. Cho reveals that he is there after Se-ri and warns that when he finds her, he will spare no penance. Then Ri Jong gets excited and attacks his superior, which results in the captain being arrested for his actions. Ri Jong, when he is in his cell, asks his soldiers for help when they go to visit him, to call Seo Dan. The man wants to talk to her. The captain asks her if she took the marriage problem and the cause to Ri Jong's father, because as Mr. Cho is after the woman, it can only be her father who is with her. Seo Dan confirms, so the captain tells his fiancée to take a message to the Lord that if he harms his beloved, the man will lose his only son left alive. We see in the next scene the son of the eavesdropper. The boy went to his father's work and says that he saw when the armed men took Se-ri, so the little boy ended up taking the gift she had left behind and giving it to the eavesdropper, which again has the clock haunting him. And Ri Jong asked his soldiers to do him another favor, to spread the word that his father is the director of the Politburo, so that he would soon be released, since this information is not known to everyone. Soon the rumor reaches the ears of the senior colonel's wife, and when she tells her husband, the man runs to the place to release him. In the next scene, we see that the protagonist is at Ri Zhang's father's house. However, she doesn't know who he is. In fact, the woman believes that this man is Xiao Dan's father and caught her so that her wedding, supposed daughter, would not be ruined. To defend the captain, the woman tells everything that happened from the beginning, and when the man asks her about her having any romantic interest in Ri Zhang, Ri is honest and says that she ended up developing it unintentionally, but that it is not reciprocated. The captain's mother was listening to the conversation hidden in the next corridor. So when the protagonist is sent back to the little room where they are locking her, the woman goes up to talk to Ri, who asks her if the captain is okay. The man's mother notices how much the woman likes her son, so she takes her to rest in his room. As soon as she sees the bookshelf, Ri realizes that the couple are actually Ri Zhang's parents, not Xiao Dan, as she had thought, and that this is the man's room. In the middle of the night, the protagonist couldn't sleep, so she started looking at the captain's photo album from when he was little and his diaries. Later, she even plays a song on her lover's piano. Meanwhile, the senior colonel obtained freedom for Captain Ri, and the man goes as quickly as he can to his father's house to try to get news about his beloved. Ri Zhang is in the living room shouting at his father, his mother, and Ri. They hear everything from the hallway, as they were there when the man arrived. After hearing the beautiful words that Captain Ri spoke about not being able to live without knowing if the protagonist was okay, his mother pulled Ri to show her that she was alive. Ri Zhang ends up explaining better how they got into this situation to his father, but the man can no longer stand their passionate looks and asks them to get out of his way. In the next scene, we see Xiao Dan in the restaurant of the hotel where Sung Jun is staying. While he is having dinner, the woman talks about how she met Captain Ri. The two studied at the same school, and although they always exchanged glances and smiles, they never really spoke to each other on the spot. However, to Xiao Dan, it seemed like they already knew each other deeply. Years later, the families arranged their engagement, and Xiao Dan traveled to Switzerland to get to know each other better. As soon as she arrives and they go to talk, the man talks as if it were the first time they met, so Xiao Dan, to avoid embarrassment because he doesn't remember her from school, pretends it was the first time seeing him too. Returning to the two at the hotel restaurant, because he is getting a little drunk and so is the man, he blurts out that he doesn't understand how Ri Zhang didn't fall in love with someone as beautiful as Xiao Dan and that he is almost doing it for the man. The woman also says that Sung Jun is her type, and in the end, the man has to carry her to her house on his back. As they both drank, neither of them can drive. After Sung Jun leaves Xiao Dan's house, Captain Ri calls him and asks for his help so that the plan to take Ri back can be put into action. Returning to the protagonist, Ri Zhang visits her in her old room later and reveals that his mother told him that Ri was playing songs on the piano all night. As the man was once a professional pianist, she asks if he doesn't know the music she has been looking for years. When the protagonist starts playing, the captain identifies that it is the one he composed for his brother. When asking Ri how she knows, the woman says that when she no longer had the will to live, she took a trip to Switzerland, and on the edge of a lake, she changed that thought after hearing this song. Since that moment, Ri Zhang was already saved. Meanwhile, Mr. Cho takes evidence to convince the military director to go to the Politburo director's house to carry out an investigation and catch the South Korean woman. The two go to Captain Ri's father's residence with a document authorizing them to investigate the man's house. However, nothing was found, and the military director punished Mr. Cho for putting his career in danger by falsely reporting such an important man. In the next scene, we see that Ri Zhang had asked the senior colonel for a favor, that he and his soldiers would go to the front line in an emergency team change, and the man allowed it. The plan is that this way he can place Ri back in South Korea, crossing the border, and with his trustworthy soldiers, no one will try to do anything against the protagonist. And while they wait for dark to put the last phase of the plan into action, the protagonist enjoys her last moments with her friends from the north in an abandoned house in the demilitarized area. In the south, The protagonist's mother goes to her house with her daughters-in-law and remembers when she visited her some time ago, asking Se-ri not to found her company, so that she would think about how her brothers can't do so well in business and leave your dream aside. Of course, the protagonist didn't do what was asked, and even so, with this family unbalanced, in Se-ri's office there was a photo she took of her mother that day. Night has arrived, and when the captain is taking the protagonist to the border, he comments that the mourning period she had established for the man should be useful for Se-ri too. During this period, they will not be able to date anyone. However, he then changes his mind when he remembers what the protagonist wanted to do with herself in Switzerland and asks her to never be alone again. The woman will always have him by her side, although not physically. But Ri-jong adds that he will always wish that she doesn't feel alone and is happy. Upon arriving at the border, Se-ri has to go alone to the place the captain indicated. However, when she took her first steps into the south, the man crossed to give his last hug and kiss to his beloved. In the next scene, we see the protagonist return to her company. Everyone was shocked to see her, and taking advantage of the cameras, the woman announced that for 1 week her products will have a 50% discount. Afterwards, Se-ri goes up to the meeting room, and on the way she meets her right-hand man, who cries and hugs her, thrilled to see her alive and well again. Then, the protagonist interrupts a vote that her sister-in-law was taking about her company taking over Se-ri's company. Meanwhile, Captain Ri is sick. According to his soldiers, he isn't eating or sleeping well, and he keeps remembering the protagonist all the time. At night, the man receives a visit from the bug, and in a more private place, Man-bok reveals that Ri-jong's brother was the only one who treated him with dignity and told the true story about his accident. The man says that the captain can punish him any way he wants. He can't live with this anymore and asks him to just spare his family. The captain's brother was very good at listening. Thanks to him, the man's baby didn't go away with the swine flu, and Man-bok only did the job intended for him of passing on information about his friend and listening to him because the Captain Cho, at the time, threatened him, saying that if the man didn't do it, he would send the bug's mother to a concentration camp. The man's story ended in tragedy because he was carrying out an investigation into Mr. Cho. And as the listener gave him the tape of the man talking about him and the watch that the captain had given to his brother as a gift, inside was a copy of the report with the evidence that the brother had obtained. Ri-jong decided to finish what his brother started. He sent a copy of the document to his father and then took another copy to the State Security Department. Se-ri left a letter for the village leader that she showed in secret to the people mentioned in the paper. In it, the protagonist spoke the truth about her name and everything that happened. She thanked her friends in the north for all the advice and good memories. Women are shocked to find out and happy to have a friendship with a famous person, despite not being able to enjoy it at the moment. In the next scene, we see the protagonist at her parents' house, where she apologizes to her mother for returning, as she believes that was what the woman wanted, for her to disappear forever. Now we see Sung-joon. He is at the hotel and is approached by security guards. The men claim that there was a complaint about the man and ask to see his passport. On the way, Seo-dan sees him, and because he is with his uncle from the State Security Department, the security guards release Sung-joon. The two talk alone later, and the man tells her about the time he helped Captain Ri take the protagonist to the border. And taking advantage of the fact that they are not hiding secrets from each other, Sung-joon is sincere when he says that Seo-dan should move on. Ri-jong offered to be on the front line to save the woman he loves. There is no reason for her to insist on this engagement any longer. The man adds that the love she felt for the captain has changed and is rotting. It has become an obsession. In the next scene, we see Mr. Cho's trial. The man was guilty of several crimes, lost his assets, and received a life sentence. Upon hearing these words, the man leaves his chair and approaches the captain. He says that the man missed something and that he will go after Se-ri to take her life. Ri-jong in his office reviewed the documents to see what he may have missed, and it seems that there is more than one place that the man used to mount the armor on the truck, so the captain quickly figured that another accident would happen so that Mr. Cho was free. And that's right, while he was being transported 2 trucks appeared and took the man out of the vehicle he was in, and then everything ended up on fire, so that the victims could not be identified. As soon as the captain finds out about the accident and exposes his theory, Seo Dan's uncle tells him to look at the facts. The man is lifeless, and they will soon find his body. However, when Ri Jong enters his office, on his desk is an article about Se-ri, and Mr. Cho calls him, asking if he liked the surprise he left in the room. In the next scene, we see that the man is already in the south and has infiltrated the security of Se-ri's company. But Ri Jong was also quick, and when the protagonist goes for a walk at night because she can't sleep, she comes across her lover. Se-ri even thought it was a dream to see him there, so close to her. We now see that the captain will not be the only person that the protagonist misses, that she will meet the man's father summon Manbok and his son's soldiers to go to the south, disguised as the athletics team, to bring your son back. Ri Jong went to the south the same way they believe Mr. Cho took, through a tunnel in a mine about to collapse, which only fits 1 person at a time and which takes 20 hours without rest to reach the destination. The next scene shows police officers searching the place, and the men find something in their search. Meanwhile, the protagonist is in a cafe with her lover, and he explains to her everything that happened, from the trial to her going to the south. So Se-ri decides that since Ri Jong will have to stay by her side, to protect you, it would be better for the man to stay at your house and assume the guise of your security guard, in case anyone questions him. Later, when they are having dinner, the captain asks his beloved how the situation of her relationship with her family is going, and Se-ri says everything is fine. The woman lies to keep the man calm, and she says that everyone was very happy to see her alive. However, dinner is soon interrupted when the protagonist's middle brother appears with his wife at the door of Se-ri's apartment. As the woman had ignored them, her sister-in-law, who recorded the password for the lock that day, went with her mother-in-law, typed it in, and the two entered the residence. The protagonist asks her lover to hide in her room and tells the intruders that this is considered an invasion, so Se-hyung tells her little sister that she knows she was in North Korea and that it wouldn't be good for her. Image adds that burying someone alive is the easiest thing he can do nowadays, and his sister-in-law also said things to make her scared. In the end, they both ask her to give up on getting their father's position in the company. However, Se-ri, who is no fool, comments that if they both knew she was in North Korea and had proof, why didn't they take her out of the place? The two quickly get up to leave after the protagonist starts asking questions, and on the way out, her sister-in-law notices the captain's shoes that were in place. As soon as they leave, Ri Jong comes out of the room and hugs his loved one. Now he understands what Se-ri meant the first time about how her family was. Meanwhile, the soldiers spend the night in a place that has a sauna, so they can stay warm, but Manbok warned the group that they should save money since they don't know how long they will stay in the south and the reserves they have. It's not very big. After enjoying themselves a lot, when they go to the checkout, the group discovers that one of them exfoliated and moisturized, so the value was much more than expected, and now they are out of money. We now see what is happening in the north. The village wives go to a fortune teller and do not receive the news they wanted. Manbok's companion discovers that her husband lied about where he was and that he may not even be able to return. Young Ae receives the news that he will have a big problem to face in the future and that there will be a bloodbath in the village. In the next scene, it is shown that everyone who was involved with Mr. Cho is being arrested, and Sung-jun managed to escape by a thread. Returning to the protagonist, she ended up changing the locks on her house due to recent events. And then she took her lover to buy some clothes and change her style. Being in the south, the man has to look like one of them. However, as the captain is not used to some things, he ended up in some situations that led him to be photographed and posted on the internet, such as holding the door of a gallery for everyone to pass. At the time, Ri Jong didn't understand the problem because I was just being polite. When the soldiers found Se-ri's company, they thought it was just a matter of entering the place and talking to her. However, in this country, accessing the protagonist is more difficult, and the security guards at the place did not allow them entry. So the men had to turn around and think of another plan. And in the north, Seo Dan went on a date with some women who seemed to be friends of his, but were very poisonous ones who talked bad about you behind your back. In this case, they don't even wait and talk in front of you. One of the women commented about Seo Dan's engagement having ended and everyone knowing about it. She adds that in the end, Seo Dan will end up alone, while all the others got married and built a family. Then Seo Dan talks about her friend's husband, who cried at her feet, asking her to marry him, but as Seo Dan rejected him, the man ended up drying his tears on the woman he had left. After a while, it started to rain, and Seo Dan asked Sungjun to go get him. The women who accompanied her dropped their jaws when they saw their friend getting into the car of such a handsome man who appeared to have a lot of money. Seo Dan allowed Sungjun to stay in the apartment she bought to live with the captain after they got married, and the man gradually falls more and more in love with her. Seo Dan's mother is worried about her daughter lately, even more so due to the rumors that are circulating about the wedding being postponed because the engagement has ended, and she comments to Seo Dan's uncle that if her daughter is with her heart beating for Sungjun, that the woman must stay with him and that she will receive all his support, as long as the man is not a thief or swindler. Meanwhile, in the south, Saeri's other brother tells their mother that Sehyoung knew that the protagonist was in the north the whole time and that he wanted to keep her there. The man found out everything through the calls and meetings that his brother and sister-in-law had with manager Oh, which is the contact Sehyoung used to communicate with the people up north to keep his sister there. The protagonist's brother believes that Sehyoung is planning something, as manager Oh is around again after Saeri's return. And returning to the protagonist, the video that some people made of Ri Jong holding the door of the establishment went viral, and there are several comments saying how beautiful he is. At one point, the man ends up receiving a call from someone telling him that he has arranged a meeting with Mr. Cho and giving him the location. As soon as she returns to Saeri's room, the captain explains to her that he may not return after the meeting with the man, and so that both of them know at least if the other is okay or where he is, the protagonist puts the location of the two on their cell phone, so they will know their exact location. Then night comes and Ri Jong goes to the meeting place. There, the man comes across a trap, and several men try to attack him, but the captain manages to finish them all off. Meanwhile, the protagonist is getting ready to go home. When she arrives at the parking lot, she knocks on the hood of her car to check that there is no animal in the engine, as her lover taught her, and as she does so, she realizes that on the seat behind your vehicle, there is someone. Then the woman runs out with her cell phone in her hand, which unfortunately ends up falling. Saeri even manages to lose the man, and when Ri Jong calls his beloved, the person who answers is Mr. Cho, who warns that he has a gun pointed at the woman, and if he doesn't arrive at the scene soon, she will lose her life. As soon as the man appears, Mr. Cho has the captain in his sights the entire time, and the two continue talking over the phone. To show her lover that she is not detained by Mr. Cho, Saeri turns off the lights in the place, and he shouts that he's okay and that the captain should run away and save himself. However, her lover managed to find her in the midst of this shouting, and the lack of light caught the attention of the other security guards, so Mr. Cho disappeared immediately. Going back to the past in a quick cut, we see that the protagonist had already met Seo Dan. In addition to that time on the bridge when she took a photo of the couple, the two were in a little store and Saeri was buying several sweets, so she looked at Seo Dan and explained that when you are sad, it is good to have this to calm your heart, and then the woman grabbed some bars too. Right after the photo, we see that Seo Dan eats a bar because she is frustrated with her relationship. And the funny thing about it all is that the three of them have crossed paths several times, but they don't recognize each other. The next day, Saeri started taking care of everything. She bought the property where her lover was attacked, gathered the men who lived there, and made a proposal to them if they find out who is behind Ri Jong's attack, she will forgive rent and condominium fees. What's more, whoever manages to catch Mr. Cho will receive a sum of money as a reward. The sooner they catch him, the greater the value. Afterwards, the protagonist goes after Su Chan, the man who was next to her right arm, insisting that the woman was still alive. Sairi recognizes all the efforts he made and her insistence on showing everyone that the woman was somewhere in the north, which led him to discover the transmission of her voice that proves everything. So the protagonist offered the man a job, which will pay triple his current salary, and he will gain several other benefits as well. Suchan was already very happy with Sairi's return. Now he will be eternally grateful, just like she feels towards him. Meanwhile, the soldiers went to spend the night in the place that has the sauna again, and each one talked about their day. One of them spent the day at the computer playing an online game. The boy said that in the game you can try to make alliances with people, and when he tried with a so-called tomato grower, the player refused, so they started to duel. It turns out that this tomato grower was Ri Zhang, and her soldier had no idea, nor did the man. The captain ended up losing the duel, but the two continued fighting in the game chat and arranged to meet outside the platform. However, Ri Zhang did not show up instead. Sairi arrived home at that time and forbade the man from leaving until the cut that one of the men gave him in the attack healed. The protagonist ended up finding out about the purchases that the captain made within the game and that he was fighting with the other players, so he reduced his playing time per day. In the north, Seo Dan received a call from Sung Jun saying that the electricity was out all day in the apartment and that he was feeling a little sick. Because of the lack of power, the phone ended up turning off, and the two couldn't even finish the conversation. So the woman takes what's left of the food from the dinner her mother made, gets dressed, and goes to the place to take care of her friend. Eating the porridge that Seo Dan prepared, Sung Jun remembered the time when he only ate these things, right after his family ran out of money after losing the company because of a scam he suffered from a friend of the man's father. At that moment, Seo Dan reveals that he knows that he is no saint either. The woman even found out about the money he took from Sairi's brother. But Sung Jun tells Seo Dan the truth. It was the protagonist's family who took the company, and the man took the money, thinking he was doing justice to his father. In fact, he wanted to go further, become Sairi's father's son-in-law, and then put his entire plan into action, but he had to settle for the money after the protagonist broke off the engagement. Seo Dan believes that the man should rise up and return to the south to take revenge. The woman says that Sung Jun should make her family bleed, and then Seo Dan gets up and grabs a bottle of alcohol. Returning to the captain, he and Sairi start drinking, and when they are already dizzy, the man reveals to his beloved that he does not want to return to the north but rather to stay, be able to marry her, build a family, and be able to return to play the piano. Of course, these words touched the protagonist, who started drinking more and more. In the north, Seo Dan's mother wakes up in the morning and ends up finding her daughter's bed empty. So worried about the woman who isn't even answering the phone, she asks the girl's uncle to investigate and find out everything about Sung Jun. Returning to the protagonist, Sairi will have a big event today. It is the opening of another store of hers, and Ri Zhang gets ready to accompany her. She even puts on the watch that belonged to her brother. When the protagonist goes to see her beloved, when he is there, he realizes that it is the watch that he had bought for him as a gift but lost when his father's men took it. Then the captain says that she also saved him without even knowing it. In the new store, the soldiers appeared disguised as customers. They are there because they believe it is the safest place they can find the protagonist, or Ri Zhang. However, the security guard who barred the group from entering the company the other day is also there and ends up kicking them out. Thinking that they no longer have any way of contacting the two, the captain suddenly appears in the middle of the group. He had noticed the movement that had happened, and when he went to check, he came across his team. Everyone ends up getting emotional and hugging Ri Zhang. Then the man calls his loved one, who goes to the place and ends up receiving a hug from the team too. Sairi hosts her friends at her house, of course, as they are not used to such a large residence. They are dazzled. Meanwhile, young Ae is not seeing the other wives in the village, nor is her son playing with the other children, as now everyone who has contact with the family could end up getting into trouble, as her husband was arrested for helping the man, Cho. However, after a few days without anyone hearing from the woman, the wives pay a visit one night, and despite initially refusing the supplies they took, in the end, young Ae breaks down crying. After most of them have settled down to sleep at Seiri's house, when they are almost in the kitchen, the protagonist overhears Manbok telling the captain that they are running out of time, as the athletic team they came from will return to the north in a few days. The next day, we see the protagonist's father eating with his wife at the table. She then asks the man if he knew about his wife staying in the north during the period she was missing, and since yes, why didn't he tell her? The man responds that he didn't know if his wife wouldn't use this against his daughter in the future, since we saw that her relationship with the woman wasn't very good. And the mother adds one more question, whether he knew that Se-hyung hired men to prevent his sister from returning. In this last part, it seems that the man really didn't know, and we see that when the head of the family talked to Suchan and the protagonist's right-hand man, Se-hyung threw a hissy fit at the meeting, questioning whether his father would really believe in third parties and not in your son. The next day, it's the protagonist's birthday, and her mother goes to visit her. But to discuss the issue of North Korea, when the woman says that she won't let what Se-hyung did happen, her daughter asks her if she will do this to protect her eldest son, because according to the protagonist, she is sure she won't. And we see that when their relationship became shaky, we already knew that the girl's mother never accepted that she wasn't her biological daughter, and one night, the woman left little Se-ri on the edge of a beach. I told the little girl to stay there and wait for her to come back soon. However, when morning came and the little girl was found cold and unconscious by a family who was walking by the place, her mother never came back to get her, and that's why their relationship may never get over it. Then, the protagonist asks her to never visit her on her birthday again, as it ruins her day, and leaves. In the next scene, Se-hyung and his wife meet with Manager Oh and Mr. Cho. As they have similar interests, Manager Oh believed it would be a good idea to introduce the two to Mr. Cho, but when saying that Se-hyung-ri could end up losing her life, her brother backs down and says it's too much then. However, as his wife did not leave with him, she showed interest in lending money and information to Mr. Cho to carry out the plan. Returning to the protagonist, she is arriving home when she finds the place empty, so the woman begins to think that the soldiers and her lover may have already returned to the north, due to the conversation she heard the night before. So Se-ri starts crying in the middle of her living room. However, when the lights are turned on, she realizes that the men have set up a surprise for her birthday, and the protagonist feels embarrassed for being caught in that state, so she decides to go downstairs to compose herself. At this moment, Mr. Cho is watching from afar. Se-ri's sister-in-law gave him the address of the house. And the man discovers that Manbok betrayed him. As he sees him there, the man goes down to call the captain and the protagonist to go up and get out of the cold. Going back to a few days ago, we see that the captain found out about the protagonist's birthday. When he had just lost in that game, he found a recording device on the table, and when it played back, there was a recording of the day she was on the bridge. It was her birthday that day, and deep down the man could hear her voice, so he also discovered that he already knew her and began to believe that it was destiny that really brought them together. When they go up to the apartment again, they celebrate the protagonist's birthday, and it is certainly a memory that will be forever marked in her memory. Later, Ri-jong appears in Se-ri's room to give her a gift. However, the man makes it clear that she doesn't need it for significance in what she is about to get, and as soon as she delivers it, the woman discovers that it is a pair of alliances. Se-ri promises the captain that she will never take the ring off his finger. It will be a way to always keep him in her memories. Meanwhile, in the north, Seo-dan's mother goes to the apartment to see if her daughter is there, as she hasn't heard from her daughter since last night. On the way, she ends up giving some small gifts to two women from the village, so that they wouldn't talk to anyone else about seeing a man entering Seo-dan's building. Myung-eun also adds that this man is her nephew who arrived from Europe and wanted to stay in a less crowded place. However, the two women don't really believe this story. As soon as she arrives at the apartment, Myung-eun comes across Sung-joon, who treats her like a lady. The boy apologizes for Seo-dan not giving news to his mother and takes her to the room where the woman is sleeping. Seo-dan is woken up by her mother being insulted, and then the two are called to join the table with Sung-joon, who has prepared dinner. While they eat, Myung-eun asks the boy several questions about his life and the intentions he has towards Seo-dan. Sung-joon answers all the questions that the woman raised very clearly and impressed her at the end of the night, when saying that her daughter took after her mother in terms of elegance. However, when the two return to Myung-eun's house, Seo-dan makes it clear that he wants to continue his engagement with Ri-jong. Returning to the south, the protagonist gave her black card, which there is no limit to, for her friends in the north to use with whatever they want. It is her way of thanking them for everything they have done and continue to do to protect her. So the boys have fun shopping and eating whatever they can get their hands on. In the next scene we see the protagonist's sister-in-law, wanting to strike Se-ri once again and take the presidency of her company for herself. Sang-ah calls a meeting with the board of the protagonist's company, and when she is making a proposal for them to remove Se-ri from the presidency, the protagonist's mother enters the room and prevents her daughter-in-law from following through. Jong-yeon takes the opportunity to inform Sang-ah that she and her husband know about what her son and daughter-in-law did to try to keep Se-ri in the north, and that the two will wait for their visit at home to talk about it. While at the protagonist's work, she decides that she can take a day off to create more memories with her loved one, and when they are on a bridge observing the view, the man ends up talking about having discovered that they had already met. He even comments on what Se-ri said that day, that he deserved someone better than Seo-dan. The protagonist is surprised, just as the captain was when he found out, and begins to wonder how many more times they have met. Regardless of the number, in the end destiny brought them together. At night, they meet the boys at an establishment and everyone has fun watching the Korea and Japan game. And when Man-bok goes outside the restaurant for a while, he ends up finding someone unexpected waiting for him. It's the Mr. Cho. The man says that he listens to him and will have to help him take Se-ri to the north and follow his orders if he wants his son to stay alive. And once again, Man-bok is faced with a dilemma involving people he likes very. In the next scene, we see the soldiers getting ready for bed, and while talking to one of them, Ri-jong discovers who his archenemy was in that online game. It was his youngest soldier on the team, and how the man acted in a childish way fighting with children in a game. He did not reveal himself to be the tomato grower to the boy. The captain decides to leave the room to get a glass of water and ends up bumping into Man-bok, crying. In the next scene, we see the village wives talking to young Ae. The women still didn't know that the senior colonel was arrested and being investigated for getting involved in Mr. Cho's mess, so when one of the women brings this news to the table, everyone is shocked. But the village leader thinks of something. Seo-dan's mother mentioned her nephew from Europe who is staying in the apartment nearby. Maybe they can talk to him so that the boy can ask Ri-jong's father to help free him, the senior colonel. So they all go to the apartment. Seo-dan arrives at the place and lets the women enter with her, but none of them were expecting to find Sung-joon in a towel coming out of the shower. The man went to get dressed in the room, and since they are in direct contact with Seo-dan, young Ae tells him about what is happening and asks the woman to help her with anything she can, suddenly talking to her future father-in-law. We already know that Seo-dan is very cold, and as expected, she is not very moved by the story, but Sung-joon appears and promises that he will try to do something about it. Another woman who was there comments that she thinks she has seen him somewhere and then adds that it was when he went to Ri-jong's house. Later, when it's just Seo-dan and the boy, the woman asks him what Sung-joon went to do at Captain Ri's house and told him that they had agreed that there would be no lies between them. Then the boy reveals to Seo-dan that Ri-jong is not on the front line as she and the others think. The man tells Seo-dan the whole truth and says that he went to his house to help him with some tasks that the captain had requested. The woman cannot contain her tears upon hearing the truth and discovering that she was once again being deceived, then she leaves. Meanwhile, Myung-eun receives news from Seo-dan's uncle that Sung-joon is a scammer, but that she doesn't need to worry, as her own daughter knows about everything. Of course the woman's mother is nervous anyway. No one wants to see her diamond falling in love with a liar. And the protagonist proves to be a woman of her word. She had promised one of the soldiers who is passionate about South Korean soap operas, dramas, that she would take him to dinner with his favorite actress. And the boy is ecstatic with this gift. However, As Se-ri had given her card for them to use and almost nothing was spent, she decided to give each of them a small gift. The woman also owns a fashion line and had custom-made clothes made for her friends in the north. In the next scene we see Mr. Cho listening to a recording that Man-bok sent him. It seems that the soldiers will return to North Korea and Ri Jong will stay to meet with manager Oh. Next we see Se's father, Ri, who is furious breaking some things while talking to Se-hyung about the bad things he and his wife did to his sister here and during the time she was in the north. The head of the family is determined that he will demote his son's position in the company, but is interrupted when Sang-ah enters the room. The woman kneels down and apologizes for the things she and her husband did. However, thinking about controlling the situation, her daughter-in-law confuses the man and says that Se-ri was in the north by choice. She shows photos of Sung-joon and the protagonist as proof, adding that the two stole money from the family and broke off the engagement just to avoid arousing suspicion. So the father says he will investigate, but if it turns out to be another lie on the part of the couple, let it be made clear to both of them that they will be disinherited and lose everything they have. Later, Se-hyung calls the protagonist to trap her. Mr. Cho is also involved in this and the man says he doesn't care if his sister ends up losing her life in the process. As soon as Se-ri leaves the house, Man-bok warns Mr. Cho about. And on the way to her parents' house, the protagonist is forced to stop her car when she is surrounded by other vehicles. Meanwhile, Ri Jong was called to meet with manager Oh. He is also involved in a trap and when he enters an isolated place, he finds several men waiting. The captain manages to hold out for a long time fighting these men, but there are really many of them and after a while, Ri Jong starts to get beaten up. However, it turns out that our main group was prepared to face Mr. Cho's people. Man-bok told everything to Ri Jong that day when he was caught crying in the kitchen and so the captain managed to organize a way for Se-ri to be protected. We then see that men got out of the vehicles that were surrounding her and started running towards her car. And that's when the surprises begin to appear. The soldiers get out of the protagonist's vehicle and deal with the enemy. Afterwards, Se-ri takes them to the place where Ri Jong is so that the men can help him. She also summoned those boys from that building that she had made a proposal to and as they accepted to help, the woman exempted them from paying rent for 2 years. Mr. Cho was unhappy to see that his listener had betrayed him and the fight between the men began when he shot Man-bok. Unfortunately, because there are a lot of men, Mr. Cho manages to take Man-bok out without Ri Jong noticing. Mr. Cho gives Man-bok several kicks and punches, who is no longer feeling very well because of the shot he received. From afar, Se-ri watches them, but she can't do anything to help her friend. The enemy is armed and she is empty hands. But upon seeing that Mr. Cho hid when he saw Ri Jong and put him in his sights, the protagonist just accelerated her car to prevent her lover from losing his life and, in the end, she was hit. The captain fired shots at Mr. Cho, who, despite being hit several times, managed to crawl behind a vehicle, but Man-bok was waiting for him with a gun pointed at the man. However, before he fired the shot, Mr. Cho had already fled, as Man-bok closed his eyes to gain the courage to shoot. And the men of the north despaired when they saw Se-ri unconscious. None of them could contain her tears, and soon they took her to the hospital. The protagonist's surgery was a success, but after 3 days of being unconscious, investigations into what happened began. So Se-ri's right-hand man has to take Ri Jong to give his testimony as a witness, and on the way, the man ends up bumping into the protagonist's sisters-in-law. Sang-ah asks Chung-sik to send Ri Jong's resume to her, as the woman was told that he is a bodyguard, but the man responds that he can't do that without his boss's permission. And of course, the protagonist's lovely sister-in-law didn't like it. In the next scene, we see that Mr. Cho survived his injuries, but he is also in bad shape. Returning to Sang-ah, the woman decides that they should fire Ri Jong, and unfortunately, Se-ri's right-hand man is forced to do so, so now the captain can't be close to his loved one or hear about her status. Back in the north, young Ae receives a good surprise. After so many bad days, her husband has been released and can return home. So the village women prepare a meal for Seodan's mother, as a thank you for the family helping them. After a few sips of champagne, the village leader ends up letting some things slip and Myung-eun finds out about Se-ri and Captain Ri's affair. The woman ends up drinking everything she had out of anger at what the man did to her daughter, and when she gets home, she tells Seo-dan that she just wants the woman to be happy, even if to do that she has to dismantle the engagement. Returning to the protagonist, as soon as she wakes up, she asks her family to leave the room and calls Ri-jong to come back. When the man sees his beloved, he starts to cry. He hugs her and says that he was afraid of not being able to tell her, if the protagonist's condition worsened, that he loves her. Then the boys from the north enter the room and Ri-jong is surprised to see them there, since the man didn't warn them. It turns out that Man-bok is behind this. He placed a bug in the protagonist's room as soon as she was placed there, and so he was careful to make sure someone wouldn't try to do something to the woman. The boys found out about Se-ri's brothers not being very good to her, and the eavesdropper gives the woman a recording to listen to when she's alone. Meanwhile, Sung-joon asks Seo-dan to meet him. The man is worried about her, since the last time they spoke, the woman left crying. So to make Seo-dan feel a little better, Sung-joon suggests that she punch him and the woman doesn't miss the opportunity. Despite having just been beaten, the man tells Seo-dan that she looks attractive even doing this, and the woman keeps urging him to give her more compliments, which results in the two kissing. Returning to Se-ri, she listened to the recording that Man-bok gave her, and it was her mother in it. The woman was crying, asking the protagonist to wake up. Jong-yeon also apologized for all the times she blamed her daughter for the situation, unhappiness that she caused herself, and now she is ready to love her as the protagonist always loved her. Hearing those words made Se-ri shed several tears. In the next scene, we see that NIS is investigating Se-ri's case, and they already know that there are at least 2 North Koreans in the country. After picking up a pin in the cave, they used to cross into the country, and cameras recorded their presence. The protagonist also faces a problem related to a camera. A paparazzi photographs Captain Ri helping her get out of bed, and when the photo appears on social media, it becomes the subject of news stories. Later, Ri-jong became unhappy once again with one of Se-ri's relatives. Se-hyung wants to enter his sister's room at all costs, but under the protagonist's orders, the man cannot allow it. So the woman's brother orders his security guards to force Ri-jong out of the place. He just didn't expect the skills that the captain would show next, and in the end, the three end up unable to move. Se-hyung ends up giving up on entering the room, and the protagonist's employees begin to admire Captain Ri more and more. Meanwhile, Mr. Cho sent photos and more evidence to the military director, so that he can use it against the director of the Politburo. And Ri-jong ends up going for coffee with Se-ri's mother. The woman tells him that she supports the two of them being together and hands over her card with her contact information, so that Ri-jong can call her if anything happens or if she needs anything. The man asks why she doesn't stay by her daughter's side, since the lady commented that the protagonist has always been very alone, and as it leaves her speechless, Ri-jong adds that she thinks this could bring the two closer together. In the next scene we see the military director taking the photos he received to the captain's father, and the man just responds that his son is on a secret mission in the country, so not everyone knows about the information about him being there. So before leaving, since he didn't believe the Politburo director's word, the military director says that if it's a lie, his career and family will be over. Returning to the protagonist, she gathered her family in her room and decided to make a recording for everyone to hear, which will help in the investigation of the shooting in which she ended up injured. In the audio there is evidence that Se-hyung and his wife were involved in Se-ri's accident, so the head of the family says that his son will resign his position in the company immediately and will no longer be part of the family. Then the protagonist's mother gets up and does what we've all wanted to do for a long time. She slaps Se-hyung in the face. In the north, Sung-joon ends up cornered on the roof of the building where Seo-dan's apartment is staying. Some men are there to catch him, and with several weapons pointed at him, the man can't do anything but be surrendering. And Man-bok's wife is not safe either. 2 men appeared in the village to take her and her son. However, the women who are her friends do not allow this to happen, as their behavior seems to be very suspicious. Returning to the south, someone gives Seng-ah the clue that Ri-jong and the other boys with Se-ri are from the north, so the woman passes this information on to the man who is investigating the case. And Ri-jong tells his team that he will go on a date, but perhaps the man will end up not returning, so he asks them to take care of the protagonist and, if a long time passes without hearing from him, to return to the north. The investigator followed the captain to where Mr. Cho was hiding and used helicopters, several agents, and other resources to ask them to drop their weapons and surrender. Then, Mr. Cho ends up reacting when he sees that Ri-jong lowered his weapon and ended up losing his life. In his final moments, the man tells Captain Ri that there is no point now. He sends the evidence to the military director. He and his team are in trouble, and when they return to the north, they will be arrested. And Ri-jong's father and mother will lose their heads for the crimes their son committed. And the captain is taken away in handcuffs. In the next scene, we see that the man left one more thing for his beloved to remember him by a recording of him playing the song she made for her brother, so she can listen to it when she has trouble sleeping. Returning to the hospital, Seng-ah tells her husband not to get discouraged, as he has just discovered that the boys surrounding Se-ri are from the north and that the protagonist's bodyguard is also from the north. We then see that Ri-jong's team is detained and taken away for interrogation. However, the protagonist cannot stand by and watch her friends being taken away, and despite not being recovered, she goes after the men to try to stop them. Se-ri can't do anything to change this situation, and her mother stays by her side, comforting her. The interrogation did not occur the way the soldiers thought, as they were not electrocuted or had their nails pulled out. On the contrary, they received good food and comfort that they had not imagined. Se-hyung goes to his father's house to discuss the case of Se-ri sheltering the men from the north, and the head of the family already cuts him off, saying that he will not discuss family issues with someone who is not part of it. Se-jun and his wife were quietly listening to the conversation the three were having and ran to tell the protagonist. Se-ri learns that her sister-in-law, Seng-ah, intends to bring Sung-jun to their side in the investigation and let all the blame fall on the protagonist. In the next scene, we see Sung-jun in the north. The man who helped him go to the country was one of those who captured him, and he releases him when other people are sleeping. He asks Sung-jun to tie him up so no one suspects that he was the one who released him. Then the boy tries to catch a taxi to get out of that place as quickly as possible, but in this region, there are no cars available all the time. Sung-jun begins to despair, as the men are already looking for him, and the one who helps him in the end is that little boy who lives on the streets with his little sister, whom the protagonist had given him a bag full of food at the beginning. The little boy hides Sung-jun in the place where he and his little sister sleep. The men who were looking for him leave after a while, and this attitude moves Sung-jun because, upon hearing the little boy sing a song in which the lyrics talk about being an orphan and that no one in his life will cry for him, the boy realizes that he is in the same situation. So Sung-jun gives the little boy a roll of money to take care of himself and his little sister. He then realizes that the pawn shop where the protagonist mentioned that she left the ring is right in front of him, so the man decides to go to the place and retrieve the jewel. Meanwhile, Seo Dan goes to his apartment where Sung-jun was staying, and when he opens the door, he finds the house completely ransacked and the man's bag still there. Soon the woman realizes that something is wrong, especially when she tries to call the boy and only realizes that the phone is turned off. Back in the south, Ri-jong took all the blame for everything that happened. The man said that his team was there for the games, but that he convinced them to stay. The captain also said that he kept the protagonist in the north because he knew about her money, but when the investigator goes to take Se-ri's statement, he realizes that one of the two is lying. Because the protagonist made it clear that he didn't try to keep her in the country, the woman says that, in fact, Ri-jong tried to take her out of there several times, which unfortunately failed. Se-ri even talks about the time the captain got shot protecting her. However, as the testimony of the two is conflicting, there will be a face-to-face interrogation. And we see it in the next scene. Se-ri tells her lover that she knows he is taking all the blame because he thinks she could be punished in some way and adds that she doesn't need to do that because the woman will find a way. However, Ri Zhang says that this has nothing to do with it. He takes a different stance, as if he doesn't care about the protagonist, and talks about how naive Se-ri is for thinking he has feelings for her. The captain adds that he has done everything so far because of the fortune that the protagonist carries. The captain even says that seeing Se-ri at this moment is worse than ruining his entire life, and he asks the woman to leave. As soon as the protagonist leaves the room, she faints, and her mother asks for help to take her daughter to the hospital. We then see that when Ri Zhang receives the news about his beloved's condition and the man runs out to try to see her, there are tears in his eyes, indicating that he didn't want to say anything that came out of his mouth. At the hospital, Se-ri's mother discovers that her daughter has an infection in her blood due to exposure to stress without having fully recovered, as her body temperature was above 39 C, which was what caused her to faint. The mortality rate for this complication is above 40%. In the north, Sung-jun went to young Ae's house and ended up arriving at a good time. All the wives were about to have dinner, so the woman invited him to join them. As it had been a long time since Sung-jun had eaten, he even lost his manners and simply sucked everything he saw in front of him. The village leader even joked that it looked like the boy was running away from someone to eat quickly like that. Later, Sung-jun went to Ri Zhang's house, the only place he thought was safe to spend the night, and since he was able to charge his phone, Seo-dan contacted Sung-jun to find out what happened. We soon see the woman entering the house, and the boy explains that these people who are after him are Chinese criminals that Se-ri's brother sent. Sung-jun says that he has already bought a ticket to leave the country and will go to Europe. As the man is unable to go to the airport alone, he asks Seo-dan to take him there the next day, and he thanks her for everything the woman has done to help him. Sung-jun kneels down and says that he knows that a man like him shouldn't do what comes next, but since he doesn't know what will happen in the future, it's better to do it now. Sung-jun puts the ring he bought to give to Se-ri on Seo-dan's finger. The man says that if one day he comes back, when it's safe and he has a better life, with her single, of course, Sung-jun will give him a better ring and ask for a chance to live in love with Seo-dan. Sung-jun hugs his loved one, who has tears running down her face, and says he will focus on where he is going so he can return to her one day. And in the next scene, we see Ri Zhang. The investigators managed to access the emails exchanged between Mr. Cho and the military director, and they discovered that Mr. Cho would not be able to return to the north. He was warned about it, and there was no way to continue in the south after completing his objective. The man really was in a situation where the best thing that happened to him was what the investigators did. The captain also discovers that his father told everyone that he would return in a few days, and there is indeed a possibility of the south making an exchange with the north, but to do so, Ri Zhang will have to cooperate with his story. The next day, after Seo-dan drops Sung-jun off at the airport, she takes the taxi to her destination. However, the people who were behind the boy catch her. Then Sung-jun receives a call from the criminals warning him about being with Seo-dan, and at that moment, the boy has to make a choice: lose the opportunity to leave the country alive and start over somewhere else, or save the woman from his life and face the risk of losing yours. Sung-jun ends up choosing the second option and arrives at the place already shooting everyone. However, the last man shot him a few times, and the man was left in serious condition. In the ambulance, Seo-dan cries when she sees that Sung-jun might not survive. She is grateful that he faced all those criminals just to save him and says that she will definitely give him a chance when he returns from Europe. But Sung-jun unfortunately doesn't survive. At least the boy left this world feeling loved, because now he knows that there was someone crying for his death and that he was not alone as he thought. While in the south, Ri Zhang faces the fear of losing Se-ri as well. The man was taken to the hospital, as the protagonist's situation has worsened and she may not be able to get out of this. When the captain is on the other side of the glass watching her, Se-ri's heart stops beating, and it takes long minutes until they manage to bring her back. In that time, Ri Zhang has lost her ground. Later, the protagonist's mother asks the investigator to allow Captain Ri to stay until Se-ri regains consciousness. And so the man spent days and nights without eating or sleeping, just watching his beloved. Ri Zhong's team remains in the place where the investigations are carried out, and each one received an offer to stay in the country, but if they want to return, they have that option too. Everyone was impressed by the men's abilities and believed they could be useful. However, the team wants to return to their country, and the NIS board decided that the best thing would be to take them back without the case going public, which also benefits Ri Zhong's father from losing his position. In the north, the military director is put against the wall by Captain Ri's father. The people in the south sent them the evidence confirming that it was the military director who ordered Mr. Cho to do the dirty work and that neither of them are punished for the crimes they committed. Ri Zhong's father agrees that the military director will be able to choose the place where they will receive the team back and carry out the repatriation process. In the next scene, we see Se-ri's mother going to talk to her. The woman received the news that the captain and the team will return to the north at this very moment, but if the protagonist wants to say goodbye, she can take her there. At first, Se-ri didn't want to say goodbye so that the process wouldn't be more painful than it already was. However, after she finds out from her mother that Ri Zhong was waiting for her to wake up to leave, the woman goes back on her decision. So, the two get into the car, and Zhang Yun runs through traffic to try to catch up with the men. When the investigator was informed that the woman wanted to say goodbye, he even tried to stop the men from changing, but the northern soldiers were in a hurry, and when Se-ri arrived at the scene, her lover and the team had already crossed the line that separates the men. Countries. The protagonist runs out of the car, and upon seeing her loved one putting her recovery at risk once again, Ri Zhong breaks free from the officer's arms and goes back to catch up with her. The two hug, and Se-ri realizes that everyone has been handcuffed, so she cries, asking them to stay in the south so that they won't be punished in the north, but they have already made a choice, and the captain is taken back to his country along with the team. At least the two managed to say their last goodbye, and the protagonist received beautiful words from her lover, who told her that he has no regrets in his life and that she is like a gift that was given to him from heaven, literally. The man apologizes for the things he said when they had the face-to-face interview. He said he didn't mean to say any of that. In the next scene, we see them arriving in the north. In the middle of a forest, everyone is taken out of the vehicle, and the military director's car awaits them. Then the captain questions why they were there, and the officers point their weapons at our beloved team. Ri Zhong understands at that moment that he will not make it home alive. However, his father arrives with the faithful soldiers and puts an end to the mess. He points a gun at the military director and says that he cannot let the man get away with it after seeing him try to take your son's life. As the military director still fires his gun, aiming at Ri Zhong, the man's father shoots the traitor several times. When Captain Ri arrives home, his mother is emotional and relieved that she did not lose her only remaining son. Manbok's family was also moved because, as his wife couldn't get any news about the man, she started to think that he had lost his life. In the next scene, we see Seo Dan. Since Sungjun passed away, the woman doesn't eat or leave the room, and her mother and uncle are very worried. The two sit and talk to Seo Dan, trying to make her feel welcomed, and it works. The woman decides that she wants revenge on those who took her lover's life. She then goes after everyone, including Manager Oh and Se-ri's brother. And speaking of him, Se-hyung and his wife go to his father's house. In the room, they come across a little surprise. The protagonist is also present. The woman tells her brother that since the man knows so much about laws, he should have known that she could end up in prison for up to 10 years for the crimes he committed. Se-hyung doesn't understand anything his sister is saying until Manager Oh enters the room, handcuffed by the case investigator. Manager Oh says he can't cover Sang-ah and her husband because the man who took care of Sungjun in the north ended up sending all the evidence he had about the two being involved in the plan to take Se-ri to the north for taking Sungjun's life, and even the calls with Mr. Cho. The investigator takes the couple in handcuffs, and before they leave, the head of the family tells his son that he needs to cut off the rotten part of the family before it grows and gets bigger and bigger. Later, when Se-ri is at her house getting ready for bed, she receives a message on her cell phone and decides to check it out. It's a message from Ri Zhang. The man explains that the researcher helped him leave scheduled messages for his loved ones to receive throughout the year. And so she manages to contain her longing for her lover a little. Sometime later, Seo Dan's mother, Myung-eun, goes to the village to talk to the wives and tell them that her daughter is leaving the apartment, as she will no longer marry Captain Ri. But that's not the only reason she's there. The woman was recently in Europe and came across something peculiar about the place. There is a new line of facial creams from Saeri's Choice. It has packaging with women printed on it, and after analyzing it a little, she realized that they were the village wives. The name of the line is Saudade, and although the protagonist was partly the main reason why her daughter's marriage didn't work out, Myung-eun has no resentment towards her. And Seo Dan, while watching her apartment move, ends up finding a piece of Sung-jun's clothing in one of the boxes. The woman hugs the piece and ends up crying when she remembers her lover. After a while, Myung-eun decides to go talk to Ri Zhang's mother to break off the engagement for her daughter. The woman explains that her daughter ended up falling in love with someone else who loved her even more than her own life, and that's why Seo Dan won't be able to marry Captain Ri. Yunhui apologizes for the years of waiting for the wedding, and this couple's story ends just as it began. We see that Seo Dan also went to talk to Ri Zhang. She told him about the day I came to his house with Sung-jun. And that night, while looking for a candle, the woman ended up finding the camera he used to take photos. Seo Dan hated the object, and since she was his fiancée at the time, she decided to throw it away. However, the woman ended up sending the camera to a place to be repaired, and when it started working again, Seo Dan discovered that Saeri was on their trip to Switzerland, as she appears in one of the photos. Seo Dan tells the man that he believes it was destiny that brought Ri Zhang and the protagonist together. In the south, a good amount of time passes, and the captain's messages continue to arrive for Saeri. One day, she receives a vase with planted seeds at her house. Through the messages, the man sent her instructions on how to take care of this flower, and the woman gave her instructions, followed by the letter. On Saeri's birthday, she received the last message from her lover, because there are limits to them, and the man promises that one day they will meet again in the country where these flowers grow, Switzerland. Ri Zhang couldn't say when that would happen for his beloved, but he said that if everyone tries hard, he knows they will succeed. We see that another period has passed, and in the spring, the captain informs the village wives that he has been dismissed by his superiors and chosen as pianist for the National Symphony Orchestra. Then the man will leave the village, and Chi-soo will be the new captain. In the south, the protagonist suggests that her company and her family's company get together and create a program in Switzerland, a foundation that will support children from low-income families to teach them how to play classical music if the children are talented. Saeri's suggestion was well accepted and developed. In order to be able to notify Ri Zhang every year when she would be in Switzerland, the woman sent word to all the media that she would be in the country to observe how the program was going. And we see that her mother became her support and never left her side. We also discover that the protagonist's brother, who was married to Sang-ah, asked for a divorce from his wife in prison. Saeri ended up going to the country a few times and always spreading the word, but unfortunately, she never found him. Until one day, when the protagonist decided to paraglide in place, she ended up landing in a way she didn't want and ended up being in the same place where Ri Zhang was. Truly, destiny will always bring them together, and the couple realized that at that moment. We see that Seo Dan never developed an interest in another man. The woman decided to dedicate herself to playing classical music as well and to return to her studies, even performing in Russia. Now the woman was happy with her life. And Manbok finally managed to change his job. Now he no longer works listening to others, but in the middle of nature. Saeri and Ri Zhang continued to have annual meetings in Switzerland, and there the two have a very beautiful house full of photos of the couple's moments. What did you think of this season? I hope you liked the summary. Leave your suggestions in the comments and subscribe. If you liked the video, like and share to help me. Until next time.